All clear? So thanks for joining us this morning. We're the first session of the event, I think, which is quite pleasing. So thanks. Pleasing to see so many people here as well. So we're going to try and answer quite a challenging and difficult question, really. So from fast fashion to circularity. Circularity, it's often talked of in the industry at the moment. And we've got some really good experts who'll introduce themselves in a minute. But how can we encourage consumers to embrace sustainable fashion brands? And I think all of us are sort of related to sustainable fashion brands in some way. My name is Nick Reed. I'm the founder of a brand called Neem London. We've been going for about 3.5 years, and we are a menswear brand with a little bit of unisex, and we focus again on circularity. So the first thing I wanted to do was just kick off with a question, an open question for all of you before we get into the detail, which is, I think one of the challenges we have in the industry is that we often talk about what we did last year, what we're doing next year, and they're quite gradual, small, often, micro changes. Oh, we've increased the amount of sustainable fibers, we've run a take-back scheme, those sort of things. And I'd like you to all think about, what do you think fashion looks like in 2055? So just think about what will, if you think about how fashion looked in 1995, which was pre-fast fashion, if you maybe Chelsea Girl or Concept Man or CNA was fast fashion at that time, I don't know, or even Next. But what do you, and pre-internet selling, what does fashion look like in your eyes in 2055? So we can come back to that at the end. So if we just kick off with the speakers, if we could all introduce ourselves, if that's all right. Charlotte, start with you, please.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all here today. My name's Charlotte Pumford. I work for an organisation called Vivo Barefoot. We are a footwear brand that creates barefoot footwear. So that's footwear that's wide, thin, and flexible, allowing your feet to do their natural thing without kind of stability and padding and heels that you see on most of the footwear across the market today. I'm the head of sustainability at Vivo Barefoot. I've been working at Vivo for just over 5.5 years, and I've been working in sustainability for just over 12.
Sarah, do you want to go next? Sorry, thanks very much.
That's
Sarah.
all right. Thank you. My name's Sarah Jordan. I run what I call an ethical underwear brand called You Underwear. We're trying to tackle a lot of the challenges in the fashion industry, from how we manufacture, so using organic regenerative cotton, fair trade, and then we're trying to tackle period poverty by donating a pair for every pair we sell. So we've got a giving back model in that sense, as well as take back. And I've been running the business for about 5 years.
And finally, Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Andrews-Udall. I've been in sustainability for probably 2.5 decades now, working for some large brands where I've been head of sustainability and head of sourcing, like Stella McCartney, Johnstone's of Elgin, and I run now a consultancy called Sustainable Fashion Strategies. I've just founded a community interest company called the Dyer's Circle, which is to basically help the industry decouple fashion from petrochemicals, notably petrochemicals in colour. And I teach at UAL Central St Martin's.
Okay, so a great panel, because we've got someone who's a bit more sort of mid-sized, Sarah, who's a bit sort of more community-based and smaller, and then Jackie, who's very sort of academic and heavily researched. So think of some questions at the end. So I'm going to go straight into sort of the hardest question, really. Sorry for that. Which is the question we've been here to answer, and I'd like you to answer this as succinctly as you can, and then we'll dive into some specific topics related to circularity, so take back, resale, and so on. So, Charlotte, if you go first, I just want to ask you, what is, in your eyes, circular fashion, and how do we outsmart fast fashion?
What a question. So for me, I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible. I always look at it because I work for a footwear brand, a footwear organization, so looking at it through that lens in terms of footwear, which is extremely complex. It has many materials. It's multifaceted in terms of its supply chain, how many components, how many people that are kind of touching the materials and components as the products are assembled. For me, there are three key elements, I think, for circularity, and what I would like to see for circularity in future of footwear, and it's the first one is slow and local. We're working on a project at the moment which is 3D printed footwear, which is onshored footwear, which is it's not mass production in far-flung countries or territories where we're kind of mass making millions of pairs. We're making them on demand, foot by foot, person by person, and of course it's just starting. We haven't cracked it yet, but for me, slowing down the model of fashion is absolutely imperative for us to get to where we need to be with the challenges that we face. So slowing down and local is the kind of epitome of circularity as a starting point. The second thing for me, in terms of kind of talking about a circle, is at the moment that we kind of take, make, waste very linear in terms of the model that the industry is operating on. We need to be able to close those loops, and it's such a buzz term in terms of closing the loop, but it really is designing with kind of intentionality around how do you design a product for repair, how do you design it for durability, to keep it, in footwear's case, on feet for as long as possible, and how do you design it for circularity and for recycling. And that starts very much at the beginning of the process, when you're even thinking about the concept of design and making a product. And then thirdly, for me, again, overall, transparency, and I'm kind of always banging on about it, but transparency is absolutely key if we want to understand the impact that we're making with the products that we're manufacturing. Without that transparency, we essentially can't understand, how a customer is using our product, where the products and materials are coming from in the first place, and how really we can get those products back in order to be able to do something with them at the end of their usable life. There are so many people and so many facets of this linear system that we operate in at the moment that we need to have visibility over. And obviously, unfortunately, the industry that we operate in currently is quite opaque. And we need to make sure that we're cracking that and looking at that visibility so that we can understand the impacts that we're creating in order to be able to reduce that as far as possible.
All right, thanks. I mean, the thing that really jumped out there for me was the 3D design. If I could just touch on that quickly before I allow Jackie and Sarah to answer the same question, is that if we're thinking about how fashion looks in 2055, 2060, how big do you think 3D design will be at that point?
I think the opportunity for 3D is huge. So as I mentioned, we've just started this program called Vivo Biome. It is person by person. We're scanning people's feet so they have bespoke footwear, which is potentially, hopefully in future, going to be printed locally, and making sure that it's printed out of the best materials we possibly can find. We're trialing at the moment biodegradable materials for 3D printing, as well as fully circular recycled materials as well. And in order to be able to kind of extract ourselves from this linear take, make, waste, we need to be making sure that customers are really kind of understanding the concept of a kind of bespoke rather than just picking an item off a shelf, which there might be millions of pairs made. If a customer feels connected to a product, I think they're more likely to want to look after it, to be able to get it repaired, to be able to kind of really feel that emotional value of a product, especially if it's bespoke to them. So I think it's huge in terms of the opportunity.
All right, thanks very much. I'd love to unpick that a bit further later on, if we have some time. Jackie. Same question. What is circular fashion, and how do we outsmart fast fashion? I know you've got some interesting research that you've done onto some of the claims that people make around circularity.
Well, I think the first thing we have to sort of divide circularity into the different cycles, and I like to just stick with the cradle-to-cradle model of the biological cycle on one side, so soil to soil with biodegradability coming into play, enriching the soil, And on the other hand, the technical side, where you're recycling a product via either mechanical or chemical means and putting it back into the circle as another product. So for instance, plastic bottles that are recycled into a polyester yarn, like New Life, and then that can be respun. What I find that we have to clarify a lot with students, so I work with mills. With mills, it's very clear that you're looking on a circularity of yarn that's then being made into something new. So taking waste, transforming it. If you're working with a wool mill, you're either shredding it mechanically and then putting that back in. And if you're working in Como, like I do with sort of silk mills that actually use a lot of polyester, you're then working on a polyester yarn. Now, if you're working with mills, you realize that circularity for the moment is still ideal, because you can shred a wool maybe twice, but then afterwards the quality is so poor that you can't just, at the moment, ideally we want to keep on recycling and recycling.
So we can shred and recycle twice with wool, but the third time...
Yeah, so even the first time, the wool, for instance, the fibers are going to be a lot shorter. It's the same for cotton. The fibers always become shorter and they're not as strong. It's the same. We did a lot of research into ocean plastic with Parley. So I worked with a mill that then did transform this ocean plastic, which we sold to Dior, and it was a real success. But it took us about 2 years to make sure that this Parley ocean plastic, the polyester that we derived from it, could be used as a warp, because otherwise it would break, whereas polyester is known for its tensile strength. But recycled ocean polyester certainly does not have the tensile strength of a virgin polyester. So at the moment, I have slight difficulty with people really promoting GRS polyester as being something really durable, because actually, we need to realize that it isn't as durable as virgin polyester, for instance. And there is a reason why, we've been recycling wool for ages, and it used to be called shoddy. Yeah, and shoddy had...
Sort of Prato type of working.
Yeah, no, and also, we were saying shoddy, as a term in English, as it being of less quality, because it actually is. So you have to introduce some virgin fiber if you want to keep the strength. So I think we need to be less, we need to be quite real when we're talking about circularity and being aware of the actual strength of the fibers, and the fact that a lot more research still has to happen for recycled fibers to have a durable strength. However, on the other hand, I'd say that we can put a lot of effort into working on durability and using the correct virgin fibers, and maybe mixing and blending your recycled fibers with the right virgin fibers. So personally, you were talking about what it would be in the future. I'd like to see no petrochemicals in our fiber offer at all. I think that by 2060, we hopefully will have got rid of petrochemicals and will be working on new man-made cellulosics, where we're transforming biomass like algae or straw waste, rice waste, cereal straw waste, and making new man-made viscoses. So viscose will no longer be made from trees. We want to keep our trees in place, but we'll be using cellulosic biomass, notably algae, that is part of a regenerative system because it's transforming and sequestering carbon, and that will be where the fiber growth is.
So if I'm sure some of you work in sourcing or in manufacturing, if you were going to work with the most circular material fibre today, what would you suggest that we, or all of us, focus on?
I'd say wool
Right.
and silk. So silk is the most durable fibre that we have because we can work it very compact. So lots of people don't talk about construction enough in circularity. Circularity is often talked about just from a composition point of view. In my opinion, it's the structure. From having worked in textiles a lot, it's the structure that actually creates the durability. So silk, you can get very, very compact warps, which will make a really compact, durable fabric, which will last, centuries. And also, silk at the moment is the one fibre that can sequester 7 times its weight in carbon. So it's one of the most regenerative fibres you can use. Unfortunately, it only represents 0.2% of the fibre market at the moment, whereas silk mulberry has huge carbon sequestering possibilities, and it can be grown in really remote locations. It can be grown on so many different types of soils that if we grew and encouraged mulberry a lot more, we'd also be giving people employment in rural locations, which I think is really important. And on the other hand, I'd like to pick up effectively on local supply chains. I think that, we can really work on the soil-to-soil cycle by using a lot more linen. At the moment in Scotland, there's a whole movement to try and regenerate hemp and flax growing, because we used to grow a lot of flax here. Unfortunately, the UK grows flax for linseed, for baking or for cosmetic products, but we've lost the skill to make fibre, so we need more spinning facilities. I think in 2055 or 2060, the state will have invested in spinning facilities and will be using a lot more based fibres like nettle, hemp, and incorporating those because they'll be biodegradable.
Great. Let's launch a nettle spinning mill. There's an opportunity there. So, Sarah, coming at it from a commercial angle, you run a brand. What in your eyes is circular fashion? But more importantly for you, how do we appeal and outsmart fast fashion? How do we appeal to consumers doing what you're doing? Thanks,
Nick. I think both Jackie and Charlotte, their comments have described circularity, and it's the same for us. It's slightly different for underwear because you don't have the resale, you don't have some of those pieces in that picture. I think the circular piece, as Jackie said, is very much about how do you design for that from the start. I think the biggest challenge that circularity and fast fashion and the whole industry, this whole conversation is bringing up is the kind of behavior change that we need as part of it. Because for us, we're looking at naturally dyed products or undyed. We're looking at monofibers with cotton. Consumers, we are not going to be happy with those because we're so used to garments from underwear up that's got a blend, that's got the polyesters, got the synthetic fibers to help the stretch, help the fit. And until we change that, then it's going to be really difficult because you're not competing on the same playing field. And then also the fibers, we often get that question. So we manufacture in India. We've got some lovely local manufacturers that supports the communities there. Because we're using organic cotton, regenerative cotton, we don't grow that in the UK. And however much our climate changes, at the moment that isn't on the cards. But again, we've got to look at then different, if we want to manufacture locally, which there is obviously huge advantages, we need to look at different blends and different fabrics in garments like underwear. And going back to some of the earlier where you've got silk or you've got hemp or you've got some different, again, some of the innovations coming through in that space could be really exciting. So I think it's the circular piece. You're picking out the sustainability of the materials, you're picking out the durability, the longevity of it, you're picking out the recycling elements. But actually there's a huge shift in us as consumers, what our expectations are. And to Jackie's point about it doesn't last as long if it's recycled. How do you balance that and people's expectations? If you're making it better, you're taking out the petrochemical-based fibres, which absolutely agree with, in mono fibres, mono blend, or not, sorry, non-blends, mono fibres, etc., will really help, but that again is a very different expectation around the fit and the look and the feel and the durability of it. So there's some bigger issues, I suppose, that we need to kind of tackle as part of this.
Well, let's try and jump to those a little bit. I mean, yeah, go on.
Can I just make a tiny comment? Is that seeing as we're being futuristic, there is someone who has started to cultivate cotton on a vertical hydroponic system here in the UK, and it's working.
In a greenhouse, in a...
Yes, yeah. So, and it's working, and that's organic cotton. So, you know, that's one tiny thing, but hopefully
And
in
what sort of
a
scale
decade,
are they at the moment? Are they...
You know, I'm not sure.
But it's happening.
It's happening, and, you know, and it's possible.
Okay, and what, I mean, thinking of underwear, because I just want to jump into take back in a second. What's everyone's view on Tencel as a fibre? Because there's a few underwear brands, aren't there, that are sort of saying that they're circular because they're using Tencel. Any views on that?
I think I mean, the whole thing with circularity and slow fashion and sustainable fashion, it's a journey. So it's what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it, you see, I mean, underwear is a really good example. And our take back scheme has highlighted the range of everything from basically pure plastic, petrochemical fibres, to the 100% natural, whether that is cotton or whatever it is, and everything in between. So Tencel is better than some, but not as good as, and it's part of that spectrum of how do we continually change, how do we improve things, how do we bring customers with us to understand some of the pros and cons. We get huge questions about it, about why we're not using this, why we're not using that, bamboo's better. There's what I've also learned, because my background isn't in fashion or manufacturing, is there's always a compromise, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is almost being very open, and to Charlotte's point about transparency, talking about the different challenges, the pros and cons. This is a solution that might be better at the moment, but is not where we want to go. And how do we kind of make those steps? How do we collaborate to get there? Because that's another challenge for a small brand like us. How do we work together to solve some of these solutions on the design and manufacturing in the first instance, and on the sort of take back recycling piece? So,
okay, so. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, we do need to collaborate as an industry, but I still think it's important we just think about how we want the business to look like in 20, 30 years, and we sort of strive towards that. So you mentioned, I think both of you, Sarah and Charlotte, run take-back schemes. So some of you out there might be already running a take-back scheme or thinking of doing so. It's riddled with goodness, but also confusion. I just wanted to ask you both, start with Charlotte, if you could just describe your take-back scheme. To me, it's sort of step one on that circular journey. Take it back, manage it in the best way you can possible. How long have you been doing it? Talk to us a little bit about what it is, how you're running it, and what are the challenges, really?
Yeah, of course. So Vivo Barefoot launched what is known as Revivo, which is our take-back refurbishment and repair platform or program back in 2020. I believe we were the first footwear brand to do so. So it was really exciting at the time in terms of stepping into this kind of unknown world of, you know, we have an ambition for none of our footwear to go to landfill, so we needed a mechanism to be able to get the footwear back from customers, to be able to obviously, of course, try and prolong its life in repair and refurbishment, but also at the end of its life to be able to hopefully do something with in the future. And so we launched Revivo back in 2020, as I said, and essentially it's been steadily growing ever since. It's still a very, very small part of Vivo Barefoot's business, but it is growing. We have, you know, a large set of customer appetite for repaired product and for customer repairs specifically. So we resell. So there's a resale platform as well as repair and as well as take back for recycling.
And what percentage of your total sales is resale now?
It's around 5%, I think, yeah. So don't quote me on that number exactly, but it's around that. It's very small, and take back is smaller than that. So, we'll be, around just over 1 million pairs of footwear we produce this year, and, we need to be able to get as many of those back as possible to even dream of, being able to close the loop in future. The challenge is take back as well, so the customer behavioral piece in terms of how do we bring our customers along on the journey in terms of sending their footwear back. We offer an incentive, so we've just recently launched an incentive for either a discount off a new product through Vivo and or through Vivo Barefoot in order for people to send more of their footwear back. We've also opened that up to any other brand of footwear as well. So it's not just Vivo Barefoot footwear, it's also, other large footwear brands that we'll take back and do something with, because a lot of those brands also don't have take-back platforms. And we're very open and honest about the fact that we don't have the solutions yet. As Jackie mentioned, we're playing with materials in both the natural and the synthetic recycled space, knowing that they both offer different functionalities at the moment. And the hope is that we'll be able to close the loop with those in future. But until then, we're paying to store footwear and essentially have sent a little bit to downcycling for insulation and flooring and matting, etc., which of course isn't what we want to be doing. We want to be reusing those materials in time. But yeah, the kind of integration and the behavioral change piece and making sure that we're getting the footwear back, and then the logistics of growing that in terms of being able to have local solutions. So we're primarily based in the UK, Europe, and America is our largest growing markets. We have a partner that we launched Revivo with called the Boot Repair Company in the UK, who we partnered with and have been growing with across the UK and Europe. But we need to be able to offer solutions for take-back and not be shipping take-back product globally around the world, and having local solutions and hubs for people to interact with take-back and repair across all of our kind of customer regions.
So of the product you're taking back, both Vivo and non-Vivo, you're downcycling a bit, trying to recycle a bit. The product that you can't manage yet, how do you see you managing that in the next few years? What solutions might there be for that non-down recycling product? And resale, which you're reselling a chunk as well.
Yes, resale, of course, kind of trying to maximise on durability across the range so that customers can be wearing the footwear for as long as possible. We created a tool that we call the V-Matrix internally, which we score every product that we make for complexity, the materials we use, repair, refurbishment, and also recycling. We're trying to maximise that across the range so that we can hopefully be able to do a lot more repairs. We can't repair every style currently. There's historical styles as well that we need to be able to repair. So just working and kind of closely iterating with our partner in order to be able to amplify repairs and kind of the durability space. Of course, I spoke about downcycling, which is not a good option for us, and it's not where we want to be. We've partnered with end-of-life experts and kind of growing kind of innovators in order to be testing and trialing. So, we're trialing biodegradable materials at the moment. We're trying chemical recycling at the moment. We're just trying to tap into all of those avenues of innovation we possibly can to try and find solutions. But obviously, of course, again, in footwear, if I can reiterate nothing else, it's just the complexity you could have around kind of 40 different components and materials in a shoe, and trying to then look at maybe disassembling those and making sure they're all going off to the right places is a big challenge.
Yeah, so designing for circularity at the outset. Hopefully we'll go back to that. So, Sarah, you run a take-back scheme and donate as well, which is great. So what are the challenges you're seeing with the product that's coming back, and then how you manage that in a way that you're happy with?
Yeah, so similar to Charlotte, really. So we're running Take Back for underwear. We did it as a bit of a proof of concept. So we did an academic project with Imperial a couple of years ago, who said nobody's going to send back old underwear. It turns out they do. There is a market for it, because it's one of the things that actually there isn't a solution for. You can't donate to charity shops, a lot of it. There is no other home for it. So we've kind of proven that first bit.
Yeah, sorry, just on that, presumably the percentage of people that throw their underwear in the bin is very high.
Very high.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I don't have any numbers, but I would say pretty much 90, it's got to be 90 because there is no, so bras you can donate. Some breast cancer charities used to collect them, and we work with a couple of charities that do collect and redistribute them. So bras are slightly easier at one level. Underwear, socks, tights, swimwear, there is nothing really at the moment. Sometimes they get dumped in put in textile banks and that sort of thing, but again, where that goes is a highly dubious, we all know where that goes. So no real solution for it. We've got a couple of options at the moment in terms of, so the high cotton percentage, then you can we partner with an organisation called Cotton Lives On. That is going into roll mats for people experiencing homelessness. The synthetic stuff, or more synthetic blends, we're downcycling with TerraCycle. Again, secondary items like insulation, car seats. We're talking to somebody that makes pet beds for animal shelters. We're talking to another business that's turning them into products that we can sell in our shop, so candlesticks, all sorts of homewares, so some innovations. And I've got a call with somebody later about taking the nylon, the tights, and they've got a unique enzyme process, polymerization, that's happening. So there's a lot going on, but at the moment we are storing most of it.
And you don't
as well.
quite know how to manage that yet.
No, so some we're I mean, a bit like Charlotte said, it's a non-ideal first step solution. We've opened it up to any brands as well, and socks, tights, swimwear, as well as underwear and bras, just because I didn't want to be part of that whole thing about it going to landfill, there's no solution. So it comes to me at home, and I have got tons and tons of
old underwear
that at the moment, so we're piloting with lots of different innovative companies and solutions to try and tackle it with the kind of spread of materials and fibers and stuff that we've got, but at the moment there isn't really a good solution, and that is one of the problems of the industry. It's like, how do we do this? We've spoken to M&S, who's on the other end of the scale in terms of their volumes. They're making some real progress with textile and clothing, but they're not tackling underwear because they just said it's too complicated. So it is something that, again, we need to kind of tackle, but for the moment, yeah, we're looking at downcycling solutions as a first step.
So there's underwear coming back.
A lot of it.
There's shoes coming back. We don't know how to manage. We can manage some of that, but we can't manage lots of it. There's lots of little pilot projects that might have got innovator grants from the UK. I mean, how do you see that playing out in the next 5 or 10 years? In terms of the consolidation of recycling in this country?
Well, in this country, I mean, I'm going to talk from my experience at Johnston's, where I was sustainability director. And that's probably why I said wool earlier. Like, we had a take-back scheme. So we manufacture for a lot of clients within the luxury sector. And basically, for wool and cashmere, you can take back, and there is no problem at all with recycling it. You can either...
In this country, yeah, plenty of...
In this country, yes, in Scotland. So you just basically mechanically recard it, and you can reinforce it by carding it with a virgin material. That's absolutely not a problem, because you're blending wool with wool, a virgin wool with a recycled wool, and certainly with cashmere, you can blend it with a merino. And if it's already been recycled, so if it, like I was saying, if it was a second round, so you're getting a recycled cashmere coming back to you. We have a huge mattress industry in the UK. We have a lot of people making blankets, so it could be downcycled from, instead of being respun into another jumper, it could then be mechanically shredded and then sold off as filling for mattresses, which would still be a luxury product. So the scope for recycling wool and cashmere and any protein, I'd say pretty much any protein fiber, is very, very easy and easily achievable. There are many products you can choose to make with it.
But with regards to the motivation, because we're here to ask about how do we encourage consumers to embrace circularity. So how do we motivate them to to purchase from brands like yourselves that are doing things in a cleaner, newer, and hopefully more ecological way. Charlotte, you spoke about an incentive scheme. Sarah, you spoke about a donation scheme. What have you seen as the great motivator to encourage acquisition and repeat purchase with regards to promoting yourself as a brand that runs Take Back? Where have you seen customers respond?
Yeah, I think for us, so of course, offering up an incentive definitely helps. I think it all hinges on storytelling. It really hinges on being transparent, building trust and integrity with your customers. We like to talk about fantastic failures as well as our kind of champagne moments, we call them, and we disclose those honestly and openly in terms of kind of our trials and tribulations of innovation and testing and working on durability and kind of how we're trying to become this regenerative business in future. Telling that story to customers builds, I think, a bit of kind of an integrity around the brand. It showcases realness to the mission and to the real challenges. And so whilst we offer that incentive, we also rely heavily on kind of being able to demonstrate to the customer the real value of us working to find these solutions, and being able to demonstrate that we understand where these challenges are, but these are the things we've kind of proactively been doing in order to try and find solutions to those challenges. We've also been a part of other kind of pre-competitive brand-to-brand conversations, and looking into kind of how we can start to build a bit more of a broader offering to customers, and making sure that we're working together with other brands to try and find these solutions as well. So making sure that all of that is also customer facing. But I think it's a real challenge outside of kind of the financial aspect. It is still really expensive to repair footwear. It's really expensive to operate these types of programs, let alone also scale them to the level that we need them to be at. And so I think it's a case of just putting yourself out there, being open, being honest, and continuing to tell that story to customers, and hopefully that becomes that differentiator between kind of the fast fashion, the large corporate organizations versus the kind of smaller organizations that really are trying to change the business model.
And so what have you seen with regards to sort of encouraging sort of motivation for purchase with regards to your sustainable?
I mean, we haven't incentivized. We as a small business, we haven't been able to incentivize it because it's actually costing us a huge amount to run the whole program. But again, we're very transparent about that. It is the storytelling, as Charlotte said, around how do we share what we're trying to do, where we want to go. So that 2060, 2055, this is the route. We have to do some of this. Showing the flip side of it as well, and some of the challenges if we don't. The numbers around clothing that is dumped, and the tons and tons of that every second that is dumped, is a fairly shocking, certainly underwear. And sort of doing both of those, I think my experience in years before, charity sector, you can't make people feel guilty, and you can't sort of push them into it. It's about almost throwing a better party. It's like, we've got to do this. This is exciting. It can be an opportunity. It can be innovative. It can support employment. It can do all of these things and try and sell, in that sense, the idea and the flip side, trying to increase awareness of some of the challenges. So as we've talked about, the different fibers and fabrics make a huge difference. Most people don't even know that polyester is synthetic, it's a petrochemical, it's close to your skin, particularly intimate parts of your body, is causing huge problems health-wise that we're not even talking about. If we start to gently raise awareness of some of those issues, people's behavior is changing. I think it's great in a space like this, where we're all positively here on a kind of sustainable fashion event. My experience of being in our shop and doing it, you've got a real spectrum of people who absolutely do it, fold, iron, put a little note in with the underwear when it comes back, and the other side who are just not interested. But it is about starting the conversations. I think people are keen to do it if they realise the cost is a huge, again, as Charlotte said, most clothing, and certainly a lot of underwear, it's more expensive to recycle, donate it, even send it to us than buy new pairs. The basic material, the basic kind of Primark 5-pack costs less than it does for us to buy the products in. And until we change some of that, and the model, it's just not cost effective. People don't understand the financial side of clothes are seen as so disposable, so...
I guess resale isn't really...
Resale isn't an option for us. I mean, we're going back to the circularity and looking at respinning and fibre to fibre and that, whether it goes into our packaging and the bags and stuff, not just the underwear. So there's ultimate more circularity, but at the moment that isn't an option. And obviously the resale secondhand is a market, but that's a different conversation.
Okay, so we can take back, we can resell a bit, we can deal with some of that waste via donations, or waste is probably the wrong word, isn't it? And then we can recycle and downcycle a bit, but it needs to be consolidated a bit more in this country, I think we're all agreed on. But what about biodegradation? So I think, Charlotte, you've designed a shoe that hopefully biodegrades. If you could just tell us a little bit more about that, and then afterwards, if you could talk to us about your research on biodegradation and what you've learned recently, but I'll come back on that.
Yep. So we've got a couple of avenues. So I mentioned Vivo Biome, which is the kind of future 3D printing, and we launched a partnership earlier this year, which is trialing what we hope will be a biodegradable compound for 3D printing. We also last year launched our first ever 98% natural piece of footwear. It was a real challenge for us. Natural materials in the footwear space is really hard. Footwear, I think, requires an even greater amount of durability than often apparel and textiles do. And so for us to be able to reach that in partnership with quite a few different material innovators was a huge milestone. That 2% is really, really hard. So the glues, the adhesives, the dyes, the stitching threads, those are the things that we're finding really difficult to find innovations for that work, that will enable us to create durable footwear moving forwards. We're trialing, as I say, different materials, different material innovations. We've got a couple of pieces of footwear in soil at the moment and different materials in soil.
Testing whether it biodegrades.
Testing, but it's a very long journey. That 2% will probably take almost double, if not more, the time to close that gap than getting to the 98% natural in the first place. But it's just about the partnerships that we choose, and obviously the durability aspect of it is really important. But the whole infrastructure isn't yet currently set up for success. So testing, for example, we don't have the right test methods to test the different articles that we're working towards to build in terms of durability.
So interesting that. So we could design for biodegradation, but we may not be able to biodegrade the product because there may not be anywhere to sort of put the product. And what have you sort of learned about? And well, first, two questions really. What are the opportunities with biodegradation over the next 10 or 15 years? And should we be designing, you've spoken about wool and silk, but should we be designing at the outset for biodegradation, or is recycling and reuse more of a sort of stopgap for the moment?
Well, I think ideally we should be designing for biodegradability as an end. At some point, I think we should be getting rid of any material that is going to leave a trace on the planet. But I mean, that's completely idealistic at the moment, seeing as, the Anthropocene is named the Anthropocene because of the huge amount of plastic that we have. But, I think we need a lot more education going into how to biodegrade, and also ideally understand what we mean by biodegradable.
So what do we mean by biodegradability?
Well, ideally, when I talk about biodegradability, I'm aiming for compostability.
So you put it in the ground.
And you put it in the ground and it will nourish the ground. That's the idea. We want materials that will be compostable, but also add nutrients when they're being composted.
And so give us some examples of product.
Wool. Wool is a protein, wool or any protein. So any protein-based fiber will biodegrade quite fast and will nourish. But, linen is a fantastic nutrient as well. But wool was used a lot in the fields before when, in medieval times, Britain, so we do have 33 million sheep, and it's quite classic that, people use the fleece to actually nourish the soil, especially in England, where unfortunately the sheep farmers are not being paid enough. Like during COVID, they weren't even getting £1 per fleece. So that was actually going straight onto the soil because they were throwing it away. But at least it doesn't go to landfill, it goes onto the soil.
Adds nutrients.
Yes, to add nutrients. However, I think that whatever we work with, and this is where I really believe in man-made cellulosics, I don't think it has to be necessarily a natural fiber to start off with. I think as long as you have, there's a huge future for man-made cellulosics and for those to be nutrients. So new types of viscose, to go back to,
so
whether
nettle
it's tencel.
as well as nettle and...
No, nettle is a based fibre, but more like, you were talking about a modal or a tencel or an algae viscose. The new viscoses that we're about to create, which are man-made cellulosics. So, I think they'll all nourish the soil at some point.
So we need to design more with... I think there's a British wool stand around the corner there, so we'll go and have a look. And
no, but it is a really underutilised fibre, and silk, I'd say, for underwear, is absolutely fantastic, especially as sericin nourishes. So it's wonderful to use cotton, but actually sericin, will nourish your...
And is odour resisting as well, silk, in the same way wool is, or not?
Yes, and it's also antimicrobial. So that's why I'm saying protein fibres in general are fantastic. But just to go back to my own research, a lot of people actually exclude colour, and you really can't do this because colour, dyes are embedded in every molecule of your fibre. So even if you're using a beautiful organic cotton, if you're dyeing it with a petrochemical dye, that's then embedded in every molecule of that fibre. So you really need to use biodegradable plant-based dyes. And there is huge scope for building that into a regenerative agriculture scheme, local regenerative agriculture, where we're locally growing dye plants, sequestering carbon, adding nutrients to the soil, and on top of that, creating bioactive, safe, healthy clothing. So specifically for, underwear or bed linen, which is close to your skin, I'd say learn and educate yourselves about plant-based colour and the bioactive elements, because don't forget that plant-based colour is what every single community in the world, every civilization invented plant-based colour before humanity invented the skill to write. It was something that we used to adorn ourselves, to express ourselves. And it's a skill where we have a lot of education. There's a lot of knowledge that we need to rebuild upon. So I do believe that it is possible to get away from this 97% petrochemical and use bioactive colour again if we re-tap into historical knowledge and, build the present from the foundations of the past.
So I just want to quickly unpick that there. So if you're dyeing wool or cotton, but not using bio-based dyes, it doesn't naturally biodegrade. Is that right?
Yeah. So synthetic dyes are benzene-based. They are petrochemicals, and as such, do not biodegrade safely. No.
So if
they'll leave a trace. So basically, there will be trace elements of plastic of a petrochemical product.
So this lovely lady with her green wool jumper here, if it is wool, if you put it in the ground, how will that look 12 months to 2 years from now?
Well, there'll probably be little bits of unperceivable synthetic dye unless it's a lovely
And it's certainly
plant-based
not
dye.
adding-
We don't know. It may be made from ivy or ivy leaves or nettle leaves.
Has anyone used plant-based dye? Are your hands in the room? Yeah?
So,
Good.
so this piece of clothing here, I have loved and washed many, many times, but it's by Phoebe English, who, won, I think she won the Fashion Awards several times 3 years ago. So she uses recycled hangers and overdyes them with logwood and with plant-based dyes. And I've had this dress for years and years, so you can actually see elements of where it's been overdyed, but I actually like the overdying. But she also offers that once you get to this stage, you can just send it back and they'll redip it.
But the colour variety within plant-based dyes is quite broad, with the blues and lilacs.
It's the whole
greens.
spectrum. So if you look at the dyer's circle, you can see the whole spectrum of colour. And black is easily achievable with, for instance, pomegranate and iron or logwood and copper. Traditionally here we'd have used alder, oak gall and iron. So if you use alder, which grows near pretty much every single stream in England, we would have made black from alder cones, and we can still do that.
God, right. Okay, so I'm gonna go up a bit because we could unpick that for a while. So bio-based dyes, wool is probably the most circular fibre we can work with. So I just want to touch on certifications, really. Some of you may have already be B Corp or thinking about going B Corp, and remembering what we're answering here is encouraging consumers to embrace sustainability. So simple question is by going, but I think Sarah and Charlotte are both working for a B Corp company, or owning and working for a B Corp company. By going B Corp, I think we know about the challenges and the opportunities, but let's think about the consumer. Does advertising and showing yourself as a B Corp, does it encourage the consumer to embrace the brand? Charlotte.
Yeah, I think in our case it does. We're very fortunate to have extremely informed customers. We like to call them customers rather than consumers. And the way that we operate, and we put the B Corp logo on the shoe boxes, and the B Corp logo is present on our product pages, online, etc. It's another element to showcase the integrity of the steps we're taking to try and show that business can be a force for good, using B Corp's line. And we do, so we have quite a bit of engagement, and also we've been told by customers that they've been looking at other barefoot brands. The segment of the industry is really growing, but they chose to look at Vivo because of the credentials that we're trying to aspire towards in terms of becoming a regenerative business in future, and that B Corp logo really does stand out.
And then, Sarah, if you just quickly answer that before we open questions to the floor. There were some other things we wanted to touch on, DPP, potential legislation. I know all of us have got some quite strong views on that, so if anyone's got any questions. But B Corp specifically, what have you found the benefits to the business of becoming B Corp?
I think, as Charlotte said, it definitely helps with customer trust and validity, particularly in the fashion industry where there is so much greenwashing. Seeing that logo, it is increasingly recognized. It is not by everybody. Some people see it and know that it means something good, but they don't quite know what it means. But it definitely helps with the trust and accountability on that side. I think for us, being part of that community is a real strength as well. So we can collaborate with other B Corp brands. It's like a first date check. You know that you're all trying to achieve something similar and having a positive social and environmental impact. So you just get over that first hurdle of, do you want to work together? Because, we're both B Corps. And being part of that, the hive, the network that there is, B Corp month in March, it's a really good.
Good. I like that. Okay, so has anyone got any questions? So there was a lot that we touched on there. Potential fibres, base-based fibres, wool using plant-based dyes, the powers of resale and recycling and the challenges.